Hello, everyone. Welcome to Tea with TPS, informal chat with thought leaders of India and abroad. Today, we have a very distinguished guest, Sri Arun M. Kumar, who is presently the chairman and CEO of KPMG, one of the world's largest consulting companies. Before that, he was in the Obama administration as the Assistant Secretary of Commerce for Global Markets and Director General of the US and Foreign Commercial Service till the end of the Obama administration. Even before that, he was high in the KPMG itself, and then he moved to India because he found it very exciting. He is a writer, he's a thinker, a poet, and a person whom we can use to understand the world with his wide experience and capabilities. Welcome, Arun, to Tea with TPS.
Thank you, Ambassador Sreenivasan, Srini, for your very, very generous introduction. It's great to be with you. I admire your writing. I just read some piece this morning as well. Very sensible, thoughtful views on the world, and the way you're being prolific. Always have very timely comments on topical subjects. So great to be with you. I look forward to this conversation. And I hope you'll be doing more of the speaking than I will be doing.
Sure. Well, I heard about you for the first time from my dear professor, Srimati Hridaya Kumari. She used to speak very warmly about you, and later I heard her mentioning your name and mine together as her favorite students. So there is one common thing between us. She liked both of us. So your experience in the university college, that too, I think you did physics. But how did you get interested in English and English teaching? So maybe you had interest in literature even at that time. Does that mean that?
No, first of all, it was great. Professor Hridaya Kumari was one of my all-time favorite teachers. I looked up to her for her wisdom, her depth of knowledge, her unending curiosity on all kinds of topics, and just spending a little time with her in the beautiful retreat of her home once in a while was just a tonic for me, and continued to be for me long after I had left being a student. So it's really an honor to be categorized with you as one of her favorite students. How did I get interested?
He was my teacher for 10 years, both with bachelor's and master's.
For me, actually, it was in my bachelor's degree, in one of the subjects was English, and she was one of the professors we had, and clearly an outstanding professor. But I was always interested in literature and humanities, even as a high school student. So even though I was a student of physics, I was very, very interested in English literature, and that was a language I was unfortunately most comfortable with. So that was the reason why. And her classes were a treasure because she had taught through the messages, the teachings that she wanted to impart. And even more, my conversations with her outside the classroom were extremely uplifting. But University College those days was a time of it was a wonderful time to be in University College. So many great teachers, motivated students, and the general atmosphere was very uplifting. In fact, when I finished, I went to a boarding school, and when I finished, my headmaster was very keen that I go to St. Stephen's. And he even wrote to my father saying, "What is your son going to do in Trivandrum? He should be going to St. Stephen's." But my parents felt I'd been away, throughout my school years, and they wanted to have me with them for 3 years. And it's a decision I do not regret. I really enjoyed my time in Trivandrum. I'm still a big fan of the potential of Trivandrum.
Right. Almost all the teachers had a personality of their own. Each one was known for something. Yes. And what I was impressed most was the fluency of her English. So my dream was one day to speak like her, I used to tell her. So probably we did not understand everything that she was saying, but we were sort of spellbound listening to her.
Yes.
She was a little bit distant. She was not like some other teachers who would become friendly with you and so on. But still, you could see that she was affectionate and very friendly. So even after I came back, I had time to spend with her here before she passed away.
And at those times,
sorry?
I said those times also time of some amount of indiscipline as well, because there was a lot of political activity on campus, which is fine, but sometimes you could see that it spilled over into truancy in classrooms across. But in her classroom, there was no truancy, because she could just with a word or two, essentially get people to behave. So it was wonderful how she
could be very tough. One day, all the boys decided to go and coffee when she came to the class. So she only found the ladies in the class. So she didn't say anything. The next day, when she came to the class, she asked all the boys to go out. She said, "No, you don't come to my class anymore." So we had a tough time. That's kind of making amends for it. But there was a way with her. It was very fascinating.
Yeah.
Were you active in student politics or cultural activities, etc., in college?
So I was not active in student politics, although I was friends with many of the people who are active in student politics. But I had a couple of areas that I took a lot of interest. One is some friends and we founded the Science Society of Trivandrum, which was a group of folks who really wanted to promote the learning of science. We did a number of different things, including bringing out a magazine called Science Wheel, conducting talks by eminent scientists, practically on a weekly or bi-weekly basis. We had people from the Indian Space Research Organization, visiting scientists. There were lots of people who would visit Trivandrum, professors from the University of Kerala. So it was an interesting group of students who came together and did this. We conducted advanced mathematics classes, which went beyond the normal syllabus. So it was a very special time. We had a lot of great interest. And that group actually has spread around the world. And today there are multiple fields, the professors, scientists, business leaders, management professors. So it was a very interesting group that came together. So that was one activity that took up a fair amount of my time outside the class. That was maybe sometimes more than the class. And the other, there was a Toastmasters club that was quite active, which I would go to occasionally. So there was a lot of stuff going on in Trivandrum those days. We had, and then of course libraries, the British Council Library, USIS Library, which is very, very good. The Public Library, of course.
Also, the USIS that's across the street, isn't it?
It was an excellent place across the street. Unfortunately, it was shut down for a very strange reason. The reason being that the Russian Cultural Center had an accident that was used to actually throw out USIS as well. But I actually prefer to be
position that information centers will be only in cities where they have a diplomatic mission, some kind of a rule like that.
That was just a rule. But that was just a roundabout rule to push them out, just in order to placate the Soviet. But I mentioned the USIS library in my confirmation hearings before the Senate Committee of Commerce. And I continue to push for more such public diplomacy. I think it is important for countries, certainly the US, certainly India, to have a lot more of the public diplomacy that the USIS and those libraries represented.
And the university library must have been a favorite haunt of yours. University College itself had a very good library. But
yes, the university library next door was a very good library.
That was a great lesson. Yeah. So from there, you went straight to Tata Administrative Services, is it?
Yeah, more or less, I went to the Tata Administrative Services. I was only 19 years old or so when I joined the Tata Administrative Service. I was with them about 5.5 years, or 6 years before I went to a master's degree at the MIT.
So which was the decisive moment? Was it your joining Tata's or joining MIT? What is it that changed your life?
But I think both of them had different kinds of influences.
Did you imbibe something from the Tatas? Ratan Tata, you must have met.
No, very much. Actually, I was privileged to work directly with Mr. Tata for 5 years, or 5.5 years. And as I knew him, I was, as I said, by the time I worked with him, I was like 20 years old. He was 35. And the other day I told him, do you realize that you were my first boss? He said, do you realize that was the first time that I was a boss?
So he was young himself.
That's right. So in his typical humility, he suggested that it was a two-way street. It was a new experience for me, and so was it for him.
Have you kept in touch with him? Have you kept in touch with him?
Yeah, I've been in touch. So as I said, this was a recent comment he made when I remarked that he was my first boss. And he was a very remarkable person. I could see then that he had a different kind of a mind. He'd been trained as an engineer and as an architect. So he had the analytical bent of mind, and there was the aesthete in him, which is a wonderful combination, to have that scientific engineering thinking as well as the aesthetics. And I could see that in the way he thought about things. No idea was too wide for him. I mean, who was I? I was 20 years old, coming from Trivandrum, knowing nothing about business. But he would be wide open to any ideas. And I found that very invigorating. So I thought I was quite very lucky to have that chance to work with him very closely until I decided to go and learn something more.
Well, MIT is exceptionally good, isn't it? So you must have enjoyed it. And that is where the question arises between our education system and the system in the US at that time. What were the striking elements in that? What was so different with MIT than, say, University College?
It was very interesting. The first thing is that I tell you, my first day at MIT in my classroom was a learning experience for me, and in a strange way. Because most of us have done well in school and college, and we've been used to being, quote, good students, etc. And I go to this class, and the professor poses a certain problem. I raise my hand, and I have it nailed. I have the answer. But within 5 minutes, there are 20 answers that are just as good, if not better. And then suddenly you learn there are a lot of very bright people in the world. It's an amazing lesson. And I think that is one of the reasons to go to a place like that, because you are interacting with very, very bright people.
And there's a liberal education that you get, isn't it? That's another different thing.
Correct. But interestingly enough, MIT was then very technically oriented. However, they had a lot of very good departments that were non-engineering. For example, linguistics. Noam Chomsky was in the linguistics department. He also taught a political science course, which I happened to take. So in that process, I got to chat with him, over tea and coffee and all that. And in fact, there's a great lesson the story I heard from him about his meeting with Mrs. Gandhi.
Mm-hmm.
And if you like, I can take a minute to explain the meeting. So
yes.
Here he was opposed to the emergency, as most liberals around the world were. And he comes to Delhi after the emergency, and he meets her. And he is actually quite charmed by her. He says to me, she reminded me of my mother. So here you have somebody with a lot of, somebody who's an iconoclast, who totally against any anti-democratic views. But he meets Mrs. Gandhi, and her persona, just even somebody as tough as nails as Noam Chomsky, I felt a moment of weakness with her.
Yes, she has that school teacherish kind of approach. She'll teach you. And I have seen her talking to heads of state like that. But in
the case of Noam Chomsky, it looks like she had another side to her, where he felt almost a mother-son situation. Fondness for her, which his political instincts would have prevented.
And she was not overawed by him. So he was quite ready to explain and teach him a little bit. But your ambition has always been to be in the industry and business and rather than in administration. Was that the reason why you joined the industry?
The things I've had many.
From there? You joined KPMG itself from there?
No, so my story is not really. I went to Silicon Valley and I did various entrepreneurial things. And when one of those things, when one company was sold, I ended up working with KPMG because KPMG and the people at KPMG and I used to work together in the market. So they said, why don't you join us? I joined them, actually thinking I will think of my next entrepreneurial idea. But I enjoyed the work and I stayed. That's my short story.
It's surprising that somebody should stay in the same company for so long. In America, there's always hire and fire system. A few days later, you join another company. But you seem to have followed the escalator system in India and Japan, where you just go slowly, steadily, not like the hire and fire system. Is that so?
I don't know if that's correct, but I enjoyed my work. I did different kinds of things, worked with different kinds of companies. So in the consulting business, you're working a lot of variety, not doing the same thing every month or every year. Doing so many different things, working with very different kinds of people on very different kinds of problems. So I was intellectually stimulated by it, and that's how I enjoyed it.
Those golden days of San Jose and Silicon Valley, wasn't it? Because the Indians had solved problems for them. Technology had...
and I was quite active in that area also.
Startup company, that would have been a great thing to do at that time. But you were not tempted by it.
No, I did startup companies, and I did. They were bought over time. Then I moved on. So yes, I did all that. I didn't think I would stay so long at KPMG, but I enjoyed myself, and the children were growing up, and I thought it'd be nice to find more time with children. But that did not necessarily happen because a lot of travel involved in my kind of work. But overall, I must say I had a good time. I retired from KPMG, served on its board, and when I retired, I joined the Obama administration.
So tell us about that. How did you land in the Obama administration as an official?
I would say partly serendipitously. I had been invited to a couple of events at the White House. One related to a business roundtable that they would gather to listen to business leaders on various topics. And the person running the White House personnel office was there. As we were chatting and he realized I was going to be retiring from KPMG, he said, would you consider public service? And I had not seriously thought about it. So once in a while over time, it had crossed my mind, but it is not something I really pursued. But he was quite serious. So then we walked to his office and he then came back to me later and said, here are 3 positions that I think will fit you, very much like an executive headhunter would. Some of them are actually counterintuitive. I would not have thought of those myself. But of the 3, we picked this one that I eventually joined. And then having picked that...
He had the skill to spot talent, obviously. At one look, he found that here is a person who is talented enough for the administration.
That was interesting. He was a trained executive search person. So he knew how to do that. So then he
headhunter, as they are called, right?
Correct. Right. He was good at that. So then he connected me with, then I met, of course, various people in the White House, in the Department of Commerce. And it was a pretty elaborate process of what they call quick vetting and deep vetting, which took several months. Then I was selected, and I went before the 2 Senate committees, testified before them. And then I...
Senate confirmation, yes.
Yeah, and then the Senate confirmed.
The whole process of their looking through your past and various things happen.
That's right.
About. I have had examples of people who came to me and said, I'm going as ambassador to such and such country, brief me. So several kinds of briefings, several lunches. One day he comes and says, sorry, I'm withdrawing. So they're asking me too many questions about my private life.
Right.
So they were given an option. You withdraw or face the music. And he said he would rather give up the ambassadorship than get involved in those things. So such experiences I have heard. So you have to have a very good record before you are considered for these high positions. What are your memories of President Obama? Do you have any personal... What are your memories of President Obama?
So my first interaction with him was when he came to San Francisco as a candidate. And it was the group of Indian Americans, actually South Asian Americans, because he really was quite keen to meet not just Indian Americans, but a larger group. I remember he came in and He spoke about his familiarity with India and Indian food. So he said, he first of all came and said, I'm a Deshi. He pronounced Deshi the right way. He said, do you hear what I said? Deshi. And he emphasized the sh. And then he said, well, and he said, I'm such a good Deshi, I can cook a mean dal. So the naan, I leave that to somebody else.
No, even when he talked about India-US relations, he said it should not be like a chapati. It should be like a puri.
Right.
Or a paratha. So he had those images.
Yeah, so when he was an undergraduate in Occidental College, Southern California, he had one Indian roommate and a Pakistani roommate, both of whom are good friends of mine. Subsequently become good friends of mine. I think they really taught him how to chop onions, how to make keema, things like that. So he's familiar with all that.
But those were exciting times in Washington because it was a big change. A black president in the United States was a wonder. And also the charisma that he had and the change, the call for change, all these, it just clicked like that, one after the other. I remember his first nomination speech, which changed history.
Right.
And after that, everything that he said and everything that he did became absolutely, mind-boggling. And so it must have been quite exciting for you to go in administration.
First of all, I was not there, but listening to his speech in Chicago when he was elected was a seminal moment. But being with him, it was what you don't realize is when you see him on TV, he looks like a fairly thin, slim person. But actually, he's a big guy. Stand next to him. He towers over you. And he's got a big presence about him. That is something that's quite... he's got a tremendous sense of humor. He doesn't take himself too seriously. He listens very attentively in meetings. He's very, very attentive. And of course, he has a very elevated tone in the way he thinks about things. So a very special person.
Yes, his personal interactions were very, very, what shall we say, very endearing kind of approach. Because Clinton also had the same. But in his case, this was somewhat different.
Clinton also has that way, very similar. And both of them are both scholarly. They both very well deep into this. And I must give you an example of once I had the dinner with the President Clinton long ago. And the hostess had very kindly seated me next to him. So I was wondering, what am I going to talk to a former president about? So I asked him about the presidency. What do you think is really important to be a successful president? And he gave me this very interesting story. He said a story of Franklin Delano Roosevelt when he was elected president. He went to call on Oliver Wendell Holmes, the esteemed Supreme Court justice. I think Holmes may have retired by then or was about to retire, called on him. And then after the meeting, Holmes made this comment to another person who was there about Roosevelt. He said, a second-rate intellect, but a first-rate temperament. First-rate. So Clinton says, temperament. Of course, Clinton had both a first-rate intellect and a first-rate temperament. But temperament, and it's really interesting how today, in the world of business leaders, we talk about emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence will trump the general IQ. Now people are talking about social intelligence. But those are extremely important for leadership. So that was my Clinton story.
You must have met other world leaders. Do you remember some of them, their specialities?
So
you met Aung San Suu Kyi, for example.
Aung San Suu Kyi was a very interesting person I met. She was then the opposition leader in Myanmar, Burma. I met her in Naypyidaw in the Parliament House. And we were with the US delegation, including the US ambassador and my boss, the Secretary of Commerce. But first, when she saw me, she knew that I was born in India. And so she talked to me, said, where are you from in India? I said, I'm from Kerala. She said, Kerala, I love Kerala. I love to go there. And then she just started chatting to me. She said, I'm a Dilli wala. Mm-hmm. And she just, kept chatting. And then, of course, once we got in the conference room, she had some important messages to convey.
Yes, she was very, very sad that India did not give her the kind of support she expected, because we were embroiled in Myanmar politics, and there were several occasions when we could not see eye to eye with her. You know, and
I think she was a leader of the opposition. I think she was in a strange position because she wanted more support from other countries. But whether it's the US or any other country, one has to deal with the government and find the right balance. And my sense is that she wanted a bit more than that balance will allow.
No, we were inclined towards her initially, even when she was in the opposition. For example, Prime Minister Narasimha Rao was very, very concerned that she should not be neglected. He knew that she would come to power. Not only that, also because... So one or two cases I remember where he actually, acted against the interests of the military government, even when the military government was there. So that was there. But then, of course, it all changed later when we completely committed ourselves to the government. So there also she was very disappointed. But I had known her in Bhutan when she was newly married to her British husband, and she was in the young crowd. So it was very interesting. But unfortunately, she has fallen to bad times now.
She has.
The India crisis.
I know. I saw her again when she came after she was elected. She won the election as a Supreme Councillor. She came to Washington. So she was very different, more optimistic.
Then she was already with the army. He had already come to terms with the army, right?
She was pretty much in a good position after that election. Now, this next election is when the army didn't accept her election.
Then she was put in jail again. Yeah.
Right. Now that is. But the other important and very fascinating leader who left an impression on me was Prime Minister Lee of Singapore.
Oh, right. Mm-hmm.
Here's a person who's been groomed for that job. First of all, he's extremely well educated. I think he's like a mathematics tripos. I mean, mathematics rank holder or something from Cambridge University, and serves in the army, etc. Very well trained, well spoken, and very much on top of anything he talks about. Like we're talking about trade between the US and Singapore. He understands the US side with as much subtlety as the US side will understand it. Extremely knowledgeable. At the same time, doesn't take himself seriously. He's cracks, takes himself pretty lightly. He is humorous, very charming.
Well, very much like his father, I presume, isn't it? His pedigree is impeccable also.
At a time. But his father might have been a bit tougher than him. I think he comes across as approachable. His father might have been a bit more removed. And so is his wife. His wife was, of course, running Temasek, one of the world's big sovereign fund. And she also came across very down to earth. So there's some remarkable leaders out there. But one thing you learn, which I had not really thought about before I went into the government, was that it takes something. If you want to be a president or a prime minister, it takes some special qualities. So, when you're not there, you might be too facile about how you think about it. You may think, oh, how did this person become something? But there is something, people would decry George W. Bush, that he's the son of a father, and that's why he's there. But actually, that's not true. There is more in it. Even though there's more to it. It takes something to get there, which is not always realized by...
wrong people get there, we know very well that it will not last. We have had those experiences.
Get there, but even though they're the wrong people, in our view, there's something in it that they have. Yes. Gets them. You may not agree with, but you can't dismiss them.
Well, you may not have even discovered those qualities ourselves. You may find how come he. I remember when somebody was elected prime minister, I fell off my chair. Oh, he is the prime minister of India.
Right.
So that also has happened. But about Indian leaders, what experience have you had? You met Prime Minister Modi in the West Coast?
Yes, I did. And I found that I actually arranged a meeting for him to meet with renewable energy CEOs. He was very interested in meeting them. We assembled a number of them together. And each one gave very, very thoughtful comments on renewable energy and application to India, etc., because they'd come prepared. He listened to all of them. At the end of it, he responded to each one of them with great specificity in such a way that each one carried something away with him. So you knew that he was very hands-on. He understood things in detail. He understood what would work, what would not work. It was very, very impressive, in terms of how he dealt with them. I mean, and some of his ideas were savant-like, really savant-like. It's very. I mean, where do those things come from? It's it's something to think about. So he had that, and he also had a sense of humor. I know that Arun Singh was the ambassador, Indian ambassador in the US, and he said the two Aruns have injected a lot of energy into this discussion, a pun on solar energy. So he was quite very impressive.
I saw him in Washington when he was not even chief minister. Before that, he was a general secretary of the party. And when he met me, he came to see me and he said he wanted to see people in the World Bank and the IMF. So I was wondering why he wants to. He wouldn't tell me why. But when I called them, they said, "Oh, Mr. Modi is here. We would like to see him." And at the second level in the World Bank, they received him. So his reputation was that even at that time. Because later I knew what he was trying to do. He was trying to get congressmen to approve a resolution which would take some action against Pakistan for Kargil. He did it on his own through his BJP network. But the way he moved around and was specific about what he wanted was very impressive. So I was not surprised when he started taking so much interest in international relations, which he already had.
He is an out-of-the-box thinker, really out of the box in his thinking.
Yes. No, that you can see. But unfortunately, there are so many developments that took place because his trajectory up to 2016 was fantastic. Then came the Trump administration, then came all these issues, then Ladakh, then, the COVID-19. So it has become a little bit fuzzy now. But the first term was really remarkable because of these new ideas, not to be, deterred by hesitations of history, and all those things. They're very,
right. The lifting of the US-India relationship back into a positive trajectory when it had been languishing.
Talked about the new symphony, in 2016 right. in the US Congress. And
yes, I was there. I listened.
Okay. And being an American official who looks like an Indian, you have had some experience, the famous Clawson incident.
That's right.
Was it just an isolated incident or it happened several times? Because leaders might take you to be an Indian official. Such confusion has taken place.
No, that was really an isolated incident. I never ever thought that there was any question
about it. He did not. He and Nisha was there with you, isn't it?
Right.
So two of you. So he kept on addressing you as your country, right? Thinking that.
So here was Nisha and I really testifying for the House Foreign Affairs Committee on US-India relations. And so Clawson was a freshman congressman who came a bit late into the meeting. And he sat on one side, not even next to the other. So there was a gap between him and the other congressman. And he probably had not read his briefing. And he probably didn't even listen carefully to the introductions. He just jumped to the conclusion that because of our brown skin.
Senior Indian officials.
That's right. So, and of course, that was so it created quite a flutter. And I was quite surprised that by the evening, every news channel had it. And
the clip had come out and millions of people watched it and became a big incident.
John Oliver made a very funny clip of it. Also, really took off.
Evening shows must have had a great time.
Yeah, so I think it had a couple of million views, John Oliver's clip. And I think even now when he has a slow day, he seems to show it.
Yeah, this used to happen in Japan. We had a third secretary, from the east of India. And when he goes to the airport to receive our dignitaries, etc., they would immediately think that he's a Japanese. So they will start praising him. Oh, your country is great. After the Second World War, you've done so well. And he was a quiet kind of man. He would not immediately say. He would listen to all that. And then he'll say, yes, what you said was all very good and that's very true. India has been a great country. And then so such things happen. To me, what happened was I went on a UN delegation to see Mrs. Gandhi. So I was a member of the UN delegation. But she presumed that I am an Indian official. So throughout the conversation, she didn't look at me even once because she thought I was a note taker and not the deputy leader of the UN delegation. So such things do happen.
Like now it happens.
Yes, but there is a certain advantage also there, isn't it? You are being in the White House, being of an Indian origin. Are you able to do make a contribution, or was it the other way around? You had to be careful not to appear to be pro-Indian.
I think I decided, since I had quite a nuanced understanding of India, naturally, because after all, I grew up here and I worked here for 5 years before I went. So I had a nuanced understanding of India. Not only that, I knew a lot of the people, a lot of leaders in India, because I had left India, though at that point I left India 35 years or so ago. These people had all grown up and now they were sitting in positions, many of them of influence or leadership. So I knew a lot of people. So I had a good understanding of India, and that actually turned out to be a great benefit because I could see both sides. And I think I used that to the advantage, I would say, to the advantage of both parties. Certainly to the advantage of the US, because I was serving the US. I don't think it was a disadvantage. Of course, there are times when some people thought, well, is he leaning too much, etc., which is a natural thing for somebody to feel. But I think once they saw what we could accomplish, they saw the advantages of it. I don't think that was an issue. By and large,
like in the UN, sometimes very senior Indians, they feel somewhat uncomfortable when they have to take the cause of India. They want to grow outside that Indian thing and become an international civil servant. So if they have a choice, they would rather criticize India rather than support India. Such experiences we have had at the UN. Yeah. So, but I suppose in the US administration, there was no such inhibition for you.
Yeah, I didn't, because I felt that there were many areas where we could do things together. There are areas of differences, and those areas, I was going to be very objective. What needed to be done in the U.S. interest, for sure.
But your being Indian helped the process in India-US relations during that period.
Yeah, I think my understanding of India definitely helped the process, and I think that was used well and respected, and not looked at with suspicion by the people I worked with, the senior people I worked with.
And you enjoyed your public service period as much as you did in the industry?
I think I enjoyed my public service. I think public service is a very special calling. Frankly, I think anybody who has an opportunity to do it should do it. I think the ability to make an impact at scale far surpasses most things one can do in the private sector. So I learned a lot.
People say in the private sector you can do things. It is visible what you are able to accomplish. While in public service, it's a bit nebulous. You cannot say I got this agreement through. You may have played a role, but nobody will say this was done by him. Like in the foreign service, a district collector can say I built this bridge and I did that hospital. But what do we say? The foreign service, you cannot say I improved India-US relations. People will laugh. That difference is there. When you are on the hands-on position, you probably can count your achievements. While in public service, it's the group, the work of a group or a government or a mission, and they're not identifiable. Does that cause frustration?
Correct. But what you can also do is you can orchestrate a lot of stakeholders to move things at a scale that you may not be able to do in the private sector. Private sector, yes, you can win one project. In the government, you may be able to open up whole new areas where a lot more things can be done. So I think the impact at scale is a lot. I think a lot can be done. And I think I found that a lot depends on what you decide to do. So you can be in the government and decide to not do much, just go with the flow, or you can decide, let me make a difference. And you decide to make a difference, I think you can make a difference quite impactfully and at a scale that you cannot do in the private sector, because the private sector is about different things. I found the ability to make a difference at scale to be
in the public.
It's extremely attractive. Really attractive. Felt okay. And yes, it may not come back to you.
Global outlook also, the whole world you're dealing with commerce and trade and so on.
And a lot depends on your imagination. How can we get these things to work together? How can the US work with Singapore to do something together, or with Japan to promote new infrastructure standards in Asia? So these are things we did. And
which means that when now you're back with KPMG, you have become a more valuable chairman for them because of this experience that you have got, don't you think?
Yeah, well, I think the experience, both the global experience, engaging with governments, and also in my job, I engaged a lot with industry, because that's the Department of Commerce. I think those are definitely very valuable. I mean, you begin to see things, your horizons are expanded for sure with that kind of experience.
But now you are concentrating on India. What has been your experience in India? There's also, when you came, it was an exciting time. I know it became difficult afterwards. But how did you find your incarnation as a US industry leader working in India in an exciting time?
So there were two reasons why I came in India. One was that I felt it was a very dynamic place to work in. The opportunities economically, the market opportunity, the growth of industry in India, the growth of business in India, and the growth of the aspirations of people, which drives demand, which will drive industry. It was very exciting. It's historic. Second, I knew the talent.
Demands of you from the Indian side.
No, so I'm just so the reason I came, there's one. The other was the talent in India. We've got world-class talent in India. I thought the market demand and the talent in India will make for a very powerful combination.
So is your staff mostly Indian?
Yeah, like almost all Indian. We have a few, but almost all Indian.
Almost all Indian.
Yeah. So I mean, KPMG is, in India we have altogether 25,000 people in the country, of which more than that actually, about 13,000, 14,000 are focused on the Indian market.
And you find them adequate compared to the kind of people you get in the US?
I think they're top notch. The talent in India is absolutely top notch. And we serve not only in India, we also serve other markets. We do a lot of work in Vietnam, we do work in Africa, we do work in the Middle East. So because of our share, and we actually also support other countries, even the West, we do work with countries. But in these areas, the combination of our talent really makes a difference.
But then what do you think with all this talent, why is that India is not doing better? There must be something wrong with the system.
India will definitely do better. There's been a bit of, the last couple of years, they've had, like everybody else, we've been hit with COVID. But I'm a big optimist. I think the country will bounce back. I think already we can see a bit of a bounce back. Definitely.
But all the figures that we are getting now are quite promising.
Yes.
Even yesterday, day before.
Correct.
But also, foreign direct investment has increased.
Correct.
Dramatically.
It's a very good story of FDI. And the bounce back is, we're coming from a slightly lower base last year. But I think the secular trajectory for India's growth is going to be very promising, because the people are very aspirational. More and more people want to be in the middle class. The middle class is aspirational. They want their children to live better than they do. They want to have the good things of life. One might call that materialist, but I think in today's age, it's absolutely okay to have some of those to make life more comfortable. So I think all that is going to drive demand. That's going to drive industry. So I think generally a big optimist. I feel though there are some areas that a lot more needs to be done, like education. Quality of education and the reach of education really has to be improved. I think security, social security. I really worry about what has COVID done to the people who lost their jobs. How are they managing? So there are some areas where I feel that probably a lot more needs to be done. But the long-term education definitely an area that, at all levels, right up to higher education.
Yes, we are very, very primitive in our education system.
That's a leap from. And actually, the new education policy that way is a good move.
That will take 30 years. the time frame given is 30 years. So
it has to move fast, but it's an important area.
No, I tried a bit for 5 years in Kerala and failed myself because people are not willing to accept changes. They all go back and highly politicized atmosphere. Anyway, let us talk about something more pleasant like poetry. I know you have been writing poetry ever since you were a schoolboy, encouraged by your father. And I know some of your poems which you recited the other day, the one about the travel in the train and the travel in the plane, travel with your father. And it was very touching, Kerala and California. So you said the usual and the unusual. So what was the feeling of that poem which you wrote about the way in which you were traveling fast to meet your son in 5 hours across the continent? And here you are traveling up to the railway station by a slow car and going by train 8 hours to cover 150 kilometers. So that was a remarkable comparison that you made. What do you think about it?
And that poem just came to me literally when I got on a plane in San Francisco.
You always wrote on the plane, you said. That's why it's called
that
the
was
plane.
Definitely
plain truth.
That's right. Definitely one of those plain poems. But I got on a plane in San Francisco, and it just occurred. That's when it came to me that I had also traveled with my father early in the morning. This time I was to the early morning flight, then the early morning train. This was traveling at.
Here it was the champagne and caviar, perhaps.
That's right.
There you had a vada and.
That's right. And in a way, it was probably a little nostalgic for the old, in some sense. I don't have the poem with me, unfortunately, in front of me, but it was really making those connections.
Yes.
And I think to some extent, I was trying to say that there is a value in that slow train as opposed to this fast plane.
Yeah, it's a kind of nostalgic experience.
And maybe in life too. And maybe in life too, there is a place for a slow journey as opposed to a fast journey.
Yeah.
So there are different levels at which I was thinking of that.
And you said the best 2 places in the world, Kerala and California, you were able
to
absolutely relate to each other. Then this.
I remember I said that to Dr. Raj.
The second poem I saw was the one you wrote about your sons going away 10 years ago.
Yes.
To the college. That's an experience. In fact, just a few days ago, my son went and dropped his daughter at the Duke University. And he was in such an emotional stress, I cannot imagine. I sent you your poem to say that I'm sure you must have felt like that. You say that the house became smaller. Is that what you said?
Shrank a little.
Yeah. That is a very touching feeling. You may have overcome it, but at that particular moment in that time, it was very touching. It was almost like a haiku. It was only 3 lines, but it was fantastic. I was struck by it. The other one was about Kamala Das, whom you met when she was rather already aged and was not able to see you properly. And some of the things that you say there also are very, very, very interesting. She was, of course, a mystery in herself. So anyone who tries to capture her heart or capture her feelings is quite remarkable. And I could see that in that poem. What did you think of her?
I thought she was an artist to her fingertips. Really a creative genius in terms of.
But she created too many controversies, didn't she?
But that's what artists are supposed to do. They're supposed to be independent, think and write what they feel. And so she had the courage to do that. And I think some of her short stories are world class. I mean, there are some of her short stories that are so touching. The craft is very good, and the emotions, without saying too much, she brings out a lot. So that's what the beauty of her was, that in a few words, she could say things that were so deep and meaningful. And she saw things.
Do you think she enjoyed shocking people, or was it just one of her instinctive reaction to the society? How do you assess that?
I don't think she did anything to get a reaction from other people. See, that was who she was. If you like it, great. Otherwise, who cares? I don't think she really was trying to shock anybody. She was just being herself. And she's also a person with a tremendous amount of human charm. People would want to talk to her.
No, but the book, for example, My Story, where she is supposed to have used a lot of exaggeration. Actually, she did not do all those things she describes there. And that is kind of provocation, isn't it?
She's an artist. I mean, I remember I told her some story about something that happened to me. Actually, she wrote 2 short stories where I know that, and she knows that I was the protagonist. But she took a little kernel from the incident and she spun beautiful stories around them. That's what she was, an artist who's looking for material. So you tell her something, and maybe something you think is completely innocuous, but she then spins a story around it. So yes, I'm looking at my story.
But seeing the movie, you think that she is not real. Get that feeling that this is something which is exceptional person. And that's probably true. I never had a chance to meet her.
Yeah, I've not seen the movie, but she was an exceptional person. Her house in Bombay, that's where I met her, was really a salon. All kinds of very interesting, Aubrey Menon would float in and out, Kuldeep Nair, or you name it, all kinds of interesting people. She ran a periodic group of people where she get younger folks to come and read poetry. She's a very, very fascinating person. So I'm fortunate to have got to interact with her.
Yes, and writing poems in the plane, I can relate to that because 3 of my books are entirely written on the planes.
Yes.
Because as you say, that is a place where you cannot do anything else. This is like political leaders writing books in the jail. So, but if you have the internet, then that helps in the prison, in the plane, but not in the prison. So I think it can be very creative because it's a kind of compulsive situation. You cannot do anything else, and therefore it's a very productive way of using a fight. Because you always looked out to make sure that physics was working well, right? And hope all the physics that you studied, so there could be a slip, but you were quite confident that the flight will continue to fly. That was rather interesting. And that fascinating poem about the killer next door. Tell us about that.
So this is a story from Admiral Raja Menon. So he and his wife Anjali, the artist, they have a home in Alibag. So many, many years ago, this must be 15, I don't know how many years ago, I went there and Raja was relating the story, the fact that their neighbor was a killer.
Professional.
A professional. A supari guy in Bombay is the term. This is a story. And I think their house attendant, the person who kind of looks after the house, he was there. And he says, "Sir, he's a very good man." So that's when the story came to me.
Yeah, he did his job at night and then slept during the day. And who was it? It was the Chowkidar who said, you are the admiral, he's the killer.
That's right. Exactly, correct. This is what I said. You're an admiral, he's a killer.
Not perceiving it. Well, this was your first book, but you had a more recent collection of poetry, did you?
Yeah. The second one, Mantram Beach.
Yes. Yeah, I remember watching the launch, the virtual launch. And what was it? How was it different from your first collection?
It's actually not very different because in both my approach has been, as I said, to look for the usual and the unusual, and the unusual and the usual. And so the poems that you mentioned, for example, the one about my son Vikram leaving home, that's a very usual thing. Every family has that. So I tried to capture something there that everybody, capture that in a way that everybody can relate to it.
But you captured it very differently. The words you used and the image you used, like the lights do not.
The porch light. But it's true, right? When you're not expecting anybody coming back home in the evening, you switch off the porch light.
Yes.
So you no longer need to have the porch light. You don't have to put the night latch because nobody's coming back at night, which is a universal, one way or the other, universal.
Yeah, it was. It was more, I don't know, it was not hyper emotional or anything like that. You're not crying, because you knew that he went for the good of both. And therefore, that touch of, what shall we say, melancholy with a kind of acceptance of the reality, I thought was very interesting.
Correct. Yeah, I tried not to be melancholic or too emotional, actually, in any of my. I think that detracts from poetry if you try to get too, I think people have to read it. They have to feel the emotion by reading it, as opposed to my telling them what I feel.
And now, are you still writing poetry? You have more time these days?
Yeah, I'm trying to try. I'm not a very prolific. Every 10 years, I come out with something. So the first one that we were looking to play into was in 2010. Then 2020, I came out with. Hopefully, I won't wait another 10 years. Hopefully, it'll be something sooner. But I'm writing a book on trade in business, which I'm finding quite interesting.
But not a novel. You're not writing a novel.
Not a novel. It's really combining history and economics. So that's turning out to be taking more time than I thought.
You need to do a lot of research, don't you?
Correct.
Experience, but also backed by research. So those kind of books take a lot of time.
But hopefully by the end of the year, should it'll be published by HarperCollins. So we need to send chapters to them.
Very good. That'll be very useful for, shall we say, those who follow you in business and industry and even in public service. And that'll be.
So let me finish that.
But are you going to come back and settle in Trivandrum one day?
When I was in Trivandrum last weekend, I was quite tempted to see what I should refurbish the house in Jawaharnagar and be your neighbor.
Yeah, that'll be very welcome.
So.
Well, at the moment, of course, Kerala is in deep trouble, as you know. I don't know whether you have any theories about that. Why is that the COVID situation has become so bad?
Actually, I talked to many people in Kerala this week, and I heard many different points. But one thing that's impressive is that everybody's wearing a mask. Other parts of the country, that is not necessarily true.
No, but doesn't seem to be effective. If you're wearing mask, there should not be infections. So wearing mask by itself, but there are other areas where we are neglecting.
That's a good point.
Alcohol is a big problem. Nobody seems to mention it.
Which one?
Because alcohol.
Alcohol.
Because alcohol destroys immunity in people. And nobody seems to be worrying about that. Today there is a news that they are going to sell alcohol in a bus, a workshop, for example. So we seem to think that alcohol is something meant for revenue for the government, or people will die if they don't have it, etc. But it may have an impact. I don't know. The doctors are not talking about it.
But people I talked to didn't have any. There's no sense of panic. So I think people were worried about it, but it looks like there are still hospital beds. There's plenty of oxygen.
No, but the people are playing with figures. I'm not very sure whether these figures are right.
Was the antigen test
specifically identified? They said you are not tracing contacts, for example. It used to be done in the past, you remember. Now there are too many, so they say it is social infection. So no contacts. Then Onam and Eid and all that, people forget themselves, and there was not enough restriction. So there are obvious mistakes that we are making. Because otherwise, why should Kerala be like this? It has nothing to do with geography or climate or anything of that kind. So that's a bit of a concern. But let's hope herd immunity will set in. But the truth is, nobody knows anything about this disease. Really,
so many theories, correct? Not clear.
Because we have no experience of that kind. And so anyway, by the time you come, it'll all be clear, and it'll be like you'll be back. Like the old Trivandrum that you grew up in. So thank you very much, Arun, for this.
Thank you, Srini. Very good to be with you.
For you to spend some time with me. I tried to get for our listeners something of the personality of the person, and I think you cooperated in that very well, and I'm sure this will benefit everyone. So thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Srini. Thank you. Really enjoyed chatting with you. Bye.